Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the P.A.S. Report podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano. I'm glad you could join me. Make sure that you follow and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Also, make sure to visit the P.A.S. Report website, pasreport.com. Programming note, no episode is going to go out this Wednesday. Obviously, the election is tomorrow, so I'll be releasing an analysis on Thursday. See what goes on. Hopefully, we know who the next president of the United States will be by then. But since Election Day is here, I have a great guest coming on the program. I have Lee Smith. He's got a brand new book out that everyone needs to check out, Disappearing the President. Lee, great to have you back on the program. How are you today?
Nick, thanks so much for inviting me on. Such a big day, and we're looking at a bigger day tomorrow.
That's for sure, because, I mean, listen, everything going on, we've witnessed the insanity over the last 8 years. We see the corruption. And in Disappearing the President, you detail how the intelligence agencies, the partisan networks that exist within them, and how they've attempted to dismantle Trump's influence. So my question to you, what have we seen in this election cycle? And have you seen any new or evolving tactics that they use from the shadow network to undermine Trump's campaign and his supporters?
Well, I think we've seen something very important, which I talk about actually in the first chapter of the book. The book is pretty timely. I mean, I finished writing like right around Labor Day, so we saw an awful lot. One of the very important developments that we saw is when President Joe Biden was pushed out of his campaign and replaced with Kamala Harris. And what we saw right there was we saw a number of Obama aides speaking quite openly to the press, leaking to the press about what Obama's thinking was, what Obama was doing. So I call this section of the book out of the shadows, and it's pretty clear right then the control, the levers that Barack Obama has, not just over the Democratic Party, but also I tie it back and show that Barack Obama actually had a lot of control over those same intelligence agencies that gave Donald Trump that undermined his first presidency from 2017 to 2021. So I think that's really important that we understand that we start to speak about Barack Obama's role. I know that for many years it sounded like a conspiracy theorem, or speaking with a former very senior congressional official who was concerned that maybe putting too much of this on Obama would sound a little racist. I said, well, look, if we don't talk about the real problem, there's no way we're going to push forward. We can't fight the deep state, by which I mean there's no answer to fighting a bureaucracy, right? We're talking about tens of thousands, if not more, people. What you have to do is, and of course, prosecutors, district attorneys, federal prosecutors understand that you go after networks and you go after people in those networks to solve your problems. So that's really one of the central parts of the book, in addition to, it's a comprehensive account of what we've seen the last 8 years, but also saying, look, it's Obama and this shadow network that's been driving the campaign against Trump, against his aides, and against his supporters. And this is what we've seen. This is what we've seen very clear evidence of when they pushed out Biden and replaced him with Obama's candidate, Kamala Harris. I mean,
well, I have to ask you, because I find that you're 100% right. I mean, it was former President Obama and Nancy Pelosi that torpedoed Biden's campaign, forced him off the ticket, an internal coup took place. But the one thing that I'm interested in, when Joe Biden came out and announced he wasn't going to run for re-election and then gave the mantle to Kamala Harris and endorsed her, you quickly saw all the Democrats fall in line. Obama was the last one. He said he wanted to see a process. Do you think he's satisfied with Kamala Harris, or do you think that
I'm
he
not.
was
Yeah.
forced into Kamala.
No, I don't think he was forced into Kamala. I know that the different accounts that we've seen of this, but I don't think it's accurate. I mean, the other way to look at this is that look, Barack Obama is the one who got Kamala Harris the number two spot as vice president. Barack Obama wanted her as the candidate in 2020, but she totally bombed. That's where the Obamas were steering all the donors to Kamala Harris. She bombed. So the idea again again this is one of the campaign accounts. The idea that somehow Kamala Harris outmaneuvered Barack Obama is absolutely I find that untenable, and I think that anyone who's seen Kamala Harris's public performances is likely to be dissuaded from that account as well. Again, I've heard different people on the Hill who know a lot more about politics, have a lot more experience than I do, and they say, "Oh yeah, she's not a genius, but she's obviously clever because she got herself into that position." I'm like, my friend, clearly you don't know what a party girl is. She's a party girl. That's what she is,
Yeah, I
right?
mean,
There's
that's what
nothing.
a useful idiot. I mean, she went from being the worst
Exactly.
vice president in presidential
Right.
history to all of a sudden the most competent goddess that
Right.
could ever exist. It was truly stunning what the
Right.
press did.
There's no evidence ever that she's clever. There's plenty of evidence that she's managed to have high level jobs that she's not been able to handle, including most recently vice president of the United States. So again, the idea that Barack Obama was outmaneuvered by a dingbat like Kamala Harris is unreasonable. Look, I mean, what it's a lot of smoke and mirrors, and this is what the Obama faction, as I refer to them, this is what they've mastered. I mean, everything for them is communications. So the idea that it's made to look like, and remember what Obama's endorsement looked like, right? Obama's endorsement, he didn't talk. All right, this was filmed and carefully scripted. He didn't talk about the campaign that we really would have liked to have seen you win. It's like the people have spoken. The people have spoken, right? Who are the people? The people are Barack Obama. None of the people ever spoke. It's just
No.
Barack Obama. So that to me is clear what happened. But again, I know those different accounts. I'm like, I just don't understand it that we're at this point in our history, and that we've seen what's happened with Donald Trump and with Barack Obama over the last 8 years, and all of a sudden here's clever Kamala Harris. Look, if she's able to outmaneuver Barack Obama, then she belongs exactly where she is.
Yeah,
Right.
that's a good point. Now,
Good.
one of the things you outline in detail in your book is the weaponization of the control of the flow of
Yeah.
information. And I think this
Hmm.
is critical that people
Right.
understand this because to me, one of the biggest mistakes Republicans and conservatives made was that they ignored the Biden-Harris administration's national strategy for countering domestic terrorism.
Right.
But you outline how a lot of the intel officials, many of the Trump haters, when they left office, they all went to the big tech companies to go and
Yeah.
work and make tons of money. They are notoriously
Right.
anti-Trump. Can you explain what you found to the audience?
Yeah, sure. I mean, actually, this started again under Barack Obama in 2013, and Barack Obama really merged with big tech. I mean, all these, in his first campaign, it was really Facebook that helped him, right? That helped get him into the White
The
House in
Zuckerbucks.
Well, that it was even before. It was Chris Hughes, that guy who eventually wound up buying the New Republic. Chris Hughes was like the campaign social media master. 2012, it was Google. But you see all these different people, especially in Obama's second term, going back and forth between big tech and Washington, D.C., the Obama administration. What happens in 2016 when Donald Trump wins? Donald Trump also used Facebook. Right. This is one of the very important things. Trump used Facebook to great effect to reach different voters he wasn't able to reach through other media. Barack Obama was furious about this. That's what Barack Obama told Mark Zuckerberg when he cornered him in a meeting in Lima, Peru, in November 2016, a little more than a week after the election. He read him the Riot Act, right? And they all chalked that up. Yeah, he warned Zuckerberg about Russian disinformation. It wasn't about Russian disinformation because Obama knew there was no Russian disinformation, right? It was about how did you let this guy use social media, use your platform to defeat us. You are on my blacklist. right? That's what happened. So at that point, that's when a whole bunch of, after Trump's victory, then you see this huge migration, all these different people from the FBI, from the CIA. They move over to Twitter. They move over to Facebook. They move over to places like Airbnb and Reddit, right? Places that are very surprising, but they're getting paid more money there and they're watching all along. The most famous person who moved over from the intelligence services to social media is none other than James Baker, former general counsel of the FBI, who played an enormous role in Russiagate. So then Baker moves over to Twitter, where he has Trump supporters under surveillance, where they're censoring. They most famously, Baker was the last word on censoring the Hunter Biden laptop story on Twitter. I mean, this is something that came out in the Twitter files when Elon Musk took over Twitter, now X. But I showed that this is part of a larger, much larger movement. People had been migrating there. And it was really, again, this was really Barack Obama who started this. Again, so Obama is in the middle of the surveillance campaign and the censorship campaign through different assets from the bureaucracy.
Yeah, and we saw an undercover video. I think it was the chief innovative officer for Google, Jen Janai, in about 2017 or 2018. She got caught in an undercover video saying that they have a responsibility to prevent another 2016. She openly
Right.
stated that. And when you look at big tech, you look at the media collusion, you look at the Democrat Party, you look at the government itself and the bureaucrats working within government. These are pretty powerful forces
Right.
that we're talking about. This isn't like, some random organization that exists. This is the entirety of information that we see flowing.
That's
And then you
right.
have Biden CISA director Jen Easterly saying that cognitive functions should be placed under critical infrastructure protection because cognitive functions are the battlefield of the 21st century. Essentially, let's control your thoughts and
Right.
opinions and what you see and what you don't.
Right.
Uh, how frightened are you that Orwell's 1984 dystopia is already here?
Well, I'm, people talk about this all the time. They're worried about the bad role that AI may likely have in the future. Well, AI is already there. AI is already doing a lot of the censorship on social media as we speak. But Nick, I just want to drill down on something really important that you said. You said, right, it's not just some kind of massive abstraction, right? This is the regime. Right. It's very, very important. We have to understand it wasn't just a bunch of third or fourth level people over at commerce and agriculture, and some field agents at the FBI who said, let's get Trump. Right. It comes from the top. Right. It comes from media. It comes from big tech. It comes from Wall Street. And this is one of the encouraging things that we've seen, of course, during the campaign. We've seen not just Elon Musk, but we've seen we've seen people from Wall Street, like Bill Ackman, turn against the Democrats and come out and support Donald Trump because they understand what's at stake here. And again, when we're looking at the top, when we're looking at these enormously powerful figures that have all been rolled into what I call the shadow network, we understand how serious it is. Again, with the former president of the United States, Barack Obama, at the top of it. The good news is this. The good news is that they're not that strong. They're not that competent. They're not brilliant, and also they're being exposed. People understand what they're looking at now. I mean, it's amazing to me. It shouldn't be amazing to me, but just trusting the good sense of lots of Americans. I'm sure you find this all the time. You get out there on social media and you make a case and be like, yeah, of course, dingbat. We always knew that was happening. We knew that it's this guy and that guy. I'm like, all right, good. So the problem is mostly right-wing influencers and Republican officials who don't know what they're talking about. But the American public knows very well what they're looking at. And I found this reporting Russiagate. I felt kind of dumb at times. Like, yeah, it's obviously what happened. They just paid off a bunch of dirty cops to frame their opponent. So the good side, again, is that they're no longer working in the shadows. We've all helped expose them, you and me, the people in your audience. Again, the regular, ordinary Americans with good common sense, have helped expose them. And what we see behind the curtain is that they're very weak and they're very fearful. And if we look at what the if we look at what the illegal aliens represent, it's very scary and it's very terrible. Of course, the crime rates, replacement voters, suppression of wages for Americans. These are all terrible things. But there's one thing that we need to understand about it. If we're talking about replacement voters, what they're saying is they're acknowledging that Americans do not like their policies, do not like their ideas. They have to hire clients to vote for them. They have to bring in people who actually like their ideas. So they're in a very, very weak place. And I think that's one thing that we need to understand going into tomorrow. They're in a weak place. And if you see Obama out there on campaign for Kamala Harris, he's become a considerably more brittle, I think, than we've ever seen him.
Oh yeah, angry, bitter. He seems like a bitter clinger, if you ask me. A very bitter clinger.
Right. Clinging to not clinging to guns and the Bible. What's he clinging to? I don't know.
Government power.
Yeah, right.
And
right.
that's what it comes down
power.
to at the end of the day. It's about power, and they believe that they lost faith in the American people. They don't believe the American people are smart enough to make their decisions, and that the government must have the power to make the decisions for them.
Right.
Now, with that being said, as they get weaker, I think they also become much more dangerous. And over the last 2 weeks, I've noticed a major shift in the rhetoric. It started with Bob Woodward's book coming out with General Milley saying that, Trump is the biggest threat to this country, not China's Xi Jinping, not North Korea's Kim Jong-un, or the mullahs of Iran, or Vladimir Putin, or Al-Qaeda, or ISIS, or the pro-Hamas supporting terrorists that are here in the United States. It's Trump that's the biggest threat. You have the General Kelly story coming out. You have all these former intel officials coming out saying he represents a threat. And then you get the Nazi, the Hitler, the fascism arguments that are being made. This rhetoric is coordinated. It's organized.
Yeah.
Are they laying the groundwork? What happens if Trump wins? Are they laying the groundwork to try and intercede and say, well, Trump may have won, but he represents too much a threat, so we can't issue the oath of office? Do you think that's a possibility? Because that's what concerns me. I just did a podcast episode on that.
Well, that's one scenario, and that's been rolled out by Jamie Raskin, by Maryland Congressman Jamie Raskin, and he's talked about that. There are other scenarios too, and I mean, Nick, one of the really disturbing things is all these scenarios involve massive amounts of violence, right? Raskin talks about like, oh yeah, then we have to fight off the Trump hordes, and everyone gets private security, and that's when we're in civil war conditions. I mean, these are very twisted people talking about a civil war in the United States. One of the scenarios I report on in my book comes from Rosa Brooks, and maybe you'll recognize her name. She's the former Obama Pentagon official who ran the Transition Integrity Project in 2020. Well, for 2024, she ran something called the Democracy Futures Project. And one of the scenarios they're talking about, they anticipate, interestingly, at least the scenarios they've rolled out, they anticipate a Trump victory. And then they forecast or perhaps urge such large amounts of violence that Trump is compelled to invoke the Insurrection Act, at which point a number of senior military officials resign. So other military officials come in to replace them to fulfill Donald Trump's orders. But what we're talking about here is a split in the military. So, and Adam, of course, so we're talking about, blood in the streets of American cities. I imagine primarily Washington, D.C. And we're also talking about a split in the American Armed Forces, which is profoundly reckless, profoundly dangerous to put these things out there. And what we understand is that these aren't just scenarios. I mean, this is post-election contingency planning. So yeah, I'm extraordinarily concerned about that, and I think that some of the rhetoric you're talking about, Nick, like the stuff that has come out of John Kelly's mouth, Trump's former chief of staff and retired Marine general, calling Trump Hitler and all these different things. I think one of the things that they're trying to do here is they're trying to push the military toward their side. They're saying like, well, look, you have a choice. Either you're going to come down on our side, on the side of democracy, or you're going to come down on the side of Hitler, and that's how history will talk about you. That you supported, that when it came time to stand for the flag, you stood instead with Hitler. So I think they're already they're priming the military for that kind of split again, and profoundly dangerous, profoundly reckless people.
Yeah, I mean, they all believe that they're the self-anointed guardians of
Right.
democracy, and they're willing to destroy the republic in order to try and create their interpretation of democracy. So it's pretty
Right.
ironic in that. But when you look at the sustained efforts that people could read about disappearing the president, it seems like people have woken up, as you stated. There is a backlash that we may witness that backlash tomorrow, hopefully. If Trump does get into office, how important do you think it is that he begins to dismantle the bureaucratic apparatus that has been built when it comes to intel and law
Right.
enforcement and the power that these agencies have?
I believe that the single most important thing is to get an attorney general, because if they don't clean out the Department of Justice, they can't do anything, right? I mean, you can't clean out the CIA, you can't clean out the FBI. You have to have the DOJ. You got to get him the right attorney general. You have to have 20 people under him, and those 20 people, those correct 20 people under him, have to clear out at least 200 other people. So that's the most important thing. The other thing that I think is really important is the people who did the things that they did during Trump's campaign and after. These people, they have to be held accountable. So there have to be very serious investigations, criminal investigations, maybe national security investigations, maybe things that don't happen in public. Right? Because this is what's been going on since 2016. These guys have been playing around with classifications and national security stuff. So this is the Pandora's box that they opened. And if that's how they've played the game, then that's probably how the board should be turned around and played against them. But absolutely, without question, Attorney General will be the most important post for a new Trump administration, God willing, to clean up what's been happening in Washington, D.C. They can't go in there scattered and think, well, we have this person over here and that person over there, and we need to get rid of this guy. It can't be a person. It can't be about vendettas against particular people. Have to go for the top and then figure out who the most important people are to go after. Right? It's
Yeah,
not
to me, the
about.
high level
Right.
bureaucrats are always the most important,
Right.
because they're nameless and faceless. And we saw at the end of Trump's administration when he tried to declassify all the Russia stuff, they just waited him out.
Right.
And so, how important do you think it is that everything gets declassified, that the American public gets to sift through all the information
Yeah.
themselves and gets to formulate their own opinion and come to their own conclusions based on all
Yeah.
the information without classifications, unless it's like really extremely necessary to have certain classifications?
Yeah, I mean, of course, what they've used classifications for over the last several years is,
$60,000 FBI conference table,
yeah, well, right, exactly, or they do it to hide their what their
criminal
misdoings, right?
conduct.
Their misdeeds, criminal conduct, absolutely, and it's one of the reasons that we hear about people. Oh, that's an FBI investigation. They're burying it, right? That's what they did with Hunter Biden's laptop. That's what they're doing with this leak that came out of the Biden administration regarding Israeli plans about Iran. So whenever they're burying something, it's under FBI investigation. So absolutely, make things clear to the American people what's been going on here. But again, I have to say, look, these guys are bureaucrats. They do not leave their desks unless they have a piece of paper, unless there's a record. They may redact it later, right? But they don't leave unless there's a piece of paper. They're bureaucrats. These are not. When we talk about the deep state, we're not talking about the Turks, right? Boys with daggers between their teeth. We're talking about people who exchange, barbecue tips on the weekend, which is fine. But these are not America's hardest men, right? They're bureaucrats. So the thing is to go after leadership, to go after political leadership, to go after the dozens of people, as Devin Nunes describes in the book. It's 20 to 30 people. It's not 25,000 bureaucrats. right? We know who they are. We know their names. We know who the donors are. We know who the lawyers are. We know who the bad actors are. And that's who they have to go after. Once you go after leadership, then other people understand. If you want to keep your job, if you want to keep your pension, I don't care who you vote for. It doesn't matter to me. But you are going to abide by the regulations of this particular institution. And if you don't, you're going to go to jail, just like apex predator BCD went to jail. The same will happen to you because we decapitated that guy. You will suffer the same price. So get your act together or you're gone.
Yeah, it always amazes me how ideology has infected the entire bureaucracy. It used to be that it didn't matter who you supported. You still understood the mission of these agencies, but now ideology is fully and deeply embedded
They
in them.
recruited for it. They recruited for
Correct,
it.
right from the college campuses.
Yeah, I've got a couple of retired FBI agents. Well, one is now they're both whistleblowers, George Hill and Stephen Friend, and they both
They've been
explain.
on the program before. They're great guys.
Oh yeah, so those guys, they talk about that they recruited right out of the colleges. Same with the CIA, So they're recruiting for these. For ideological fanatics. And that's what we're getting. People are only too happy to go after Donald Trump. People are only too happy to go after Michael Flynn or Roger Stone or Trump supporters, pro-life activists, grandmothers who are praying in front of abortion clinics. So that's what they're recruiting for. But even then, I think, look, your ideology is fine. If on the weekend you want to go on a pro-Hamas protest, knock yourself out. I think it's frankly moronic, but go ahead and knock yourself out. But if you bring that into work here, you are in big, big trouble.
Absolutely.
All right? That's how that's how I see it being handled. Because you'll be in big trouble, and you know why? Because someone 6, 7 levels above you is now at Leavenworth. How's that? What do you think will happen to you? You can't afford a lawyer like that guy. So
that's so true. And everyone needs to check out Disappearing the President. Tomorrow, certainly going to be a historical day. We'll see how the American people feel and if the backlash that looks like it may be happening really comes to fruition. Lee, thank you so much for joining me. I enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you so much, Nick. And I look forward to speaking after tomorrow. We'll check in again and see what happened and see what will happen.
Oh, that's for sure. It's going to be interesting. There's always going to be stuff to talk about. I can guarantee you, no matter what happens, we'll have a lot to say.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at PASreport.com and follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at P.A.S. Report.